What illegal thing have you done for the right reasons? I did the illegal thing and the lunch lady used to help. I was in Seminole Middle way back when in Florida and we were really poor. Like, really poor. I used to steal lunch wraps and salad from the health bar during lunch in the cafeteria. The lunch lady knew. There was lunch A, C, all hosted at different times of the day. She wouldn't charge me until the third lunch, and even then it was next to nothing. I would have a backpack full of wraps and salads that I'd take home and share between my brother. 14 years to this date I have spent every Sunday talking to her at least 2 hours. She is old now and nobody really visits her. I tend to go see her from time to time, when the opportunity arises. I bring her Thanksgiving dinners, Christmas dinners. Sometimes I cook breakfast for her and I maintain her garden. I take her for walks. She's in a wheelchair. I love her. When she passes away, I'd have lost a mother and a friend. Frick me, that caught me right in the feels. Give her a hug from me, and tell her she's amazing. Conspired with fellow officers and senior enlisted to give one of my sailors 2 months off after the birth of his son. His boy was born extremely sick and we though he might be gone at any moment. My sailor had no leave left on the books but I didn't want him to miss what time he has with his son. So he phone mustered, checked in so we knew he was alive. For almost 2 months. All of us made sure that if anyone senior was looking for him they just missed him. The story ends on a high note as the baby survived and now, 13 years later I still see his pic from time to time on Facebook. As it happens, his wife talked to me last night and said thanks. I'd do it all over again. When I worked at Golden Chick, I would stuff boxes bags full of chicken when it was almost time be thrown out. People's 2-piece meal turned into a 8-piece family meal and then some. I hated throwing food in the trash. Plus customers were usually appreciative when they noticed. Massive pet peeve of mine. I once ordered a bunch of stuff from Costco's food court over the phone and when I got there everything was wrong. So they turned around and threw it in the trash. I went off on the manager and paid for the stuff and gave it to the homeless. Unnecessary waste is so infuriating when there's so many people who desperately need food on this planet. I technically kidnapped 3 kids, 5-year twins and a 2-year best friend sister's kids. We were supposed to be picking them up for a weekend at their grandma's. Got to their place. No answer at the door or phone. Walked around looking in the windows. We finally, barely, spot the 2-year sleeping on the kitchen floor. Ended up kicking in the back door. So B&E2 I guess. And gathering up the filthy and hungry children and taking them. 3 days later, mom calls from jail. Didn't ask about the kids, she just needs someone to come take responsibility for her to get her out of jail. After that and many other worse incidents it still took 1-2 years to take custody of those kids from her. Good for you. My best friends are flying out to Ohio tonight to take custody of my godson. Disastrous but you did the right thing. It was December a good few years ago and I was working in retail. You could spot them a mile off. The grannies and granddads that had saved up their measly pension all year just to buy the grandkids those fancy sneakers or jeans. They would come to the till knowing they had just exactly enough to cover the cost. The look of surprise on their faces when I informed them that that very item was reduced by 40% was one that would have warmed the coldest of hearts. I used my staff discount. I never used it for myself. I did the same for people that were clearly not very well off. I've been in financial diffs myself. Still not totally out of the woods yet but definitely on the up. And I know how much of a difference even a few pence can make. Yeah, you retail people are sneaky sometimes. A couple months back I was small talking with a cashier while she rang me out and mentioned the clothes I was buying were for a job interview. Q random 25% discount. I worked as a manager at a big box pet supply store with in-house cat adoptions. Kittens were always adopted within a week, but occasionally we'd have older cats, 8 years plus, who would stay with us for months. All cat adoptions come with a coupon book for supplies. Anytime a family adopted a senior cat, I manually entered a tremendous amount of coupons into the register. Not sure how illegal this is. I worked at a furniture store in the electronic department. We had a promotion going on where you could get free stuff, really rare, or 10-25% off. All you had to do was scratch the silver stuff off of the scratch tickets we gave out. You could see through the back if you held them up to the light. We checked every ticket for prices and I found a free $800 surround sound system. I brought the ticket home with the intent on keeping it and using it at another store. The guilt caught up with me that night, so I brought it back in and kept it in my pocket. We had so many well-off people come in buying $2,000 TVs and $3,000 laundry pairs that I just couldn't give it to them. A week later, a single mother who was down on her luck, she was a friend of one of the co-workers, came in to buy her 10-year-old son a 32 inches TV for Christmas, one of the cheap $200 brands. I gave her the ticket even though it wasn't my sale and said I have a good feeling about this one and traded her tickets. Her son got one heck of a Christmas gift for his PlayStation setup. I love this story. I stole a dog. I went to a friend's house one night and we were hanging out in his front yard. A super friendly dog came up to us. I asked my friend if he knew the dog and he told me the story. It belonged to his neighbors who were kind of scaring everyone else in the neighborhood. They would hit the dog in the streets. It clearly wasn't fed enough. And my friend said when the neighbors would try to get him to come to them, he would run away every time. I took him home and within a week you couldn't see his ribs anymore and he was one of the best dogs I've ever had. 10/10 would dog nap again. I used my company's client's personal customer data to tell the police where a vehicle was, resulting in a little girl that had been abducted being rescued. I didn't think twice, and I fessed up when I got back to work. Everyone told me I did the right thing but not to talk about it. It was over 10 years ago. I can be this vague. Not illegal, but it was something I wasn't supposed to do. Baghdad in 2006. We were on an overwatch for a cordon and knock. Heading up a 6-story building to the roof, we passed a crying woman in her 20s. I asked her what was wrong and in perfect English she said that Iraqi and American soldiers had kicked her door in and she was all alone and scared without a door. We continued up to the roof and set up the overwatch. I was first on rest, so I laid down. As I was laying there I started to feel really guilty. I made up my mind, popped up and told the sniper section leader I was going down a few floors to fix a door. He gave me a dirty look and said something along the lines of that being a stupid decision as we had no security except on the roof. I reiterated that I would be fine and he reluctantly said I could go. As I started heading down the stairs I became aware of how vulnerable I was. Once I got to her apartment she greeted me with a smile and I told her why I was there. By this point I was getting kinda nervous at my decision to leave the roof in the hostile area. She could see me looking around and took my hand and looked me in the eyes and said, "Don't worry soldier, you are safe here." I ended up fixing her door and we talked about the war and our lives. I apologized to her that we had came in and wrecked her home, knowing full well I really wanted to apologize for being in her country in the first place. When I left she smiled, thanked me and told me to stay safe. It was the one moment of humanity that I experienced in the entire deployment and I wonder if she's still alive. Good job, soldier. That's the kind of behavior I'd expect from an American military professional. I sometimes forget in my naivety that people in the military are human and capable of terrible things. Thanks for upholding the army values. I used to work at a thrift store, not a small non-profit ones but those big multi-store for profit ones. Anyways, we would get homeless people all the time in the store and many of them would be missing shoes or jackets, etc. So whenever they ask if they can have some items for free I just let them walk out the store. Besides, that place is so susceptible to shoplifting. The items might as well go to the people that ask. My longtime girlfriend's little sister was in an abusive relationship and refused to leave. My brothers and I went to the abuser's house with the intent of scaring him out of the relationship. We ended up just beating the crap out of him and he moved out of state a month later. 10/10 would do again. I drove through like 12 red lights and 5 speed cameras because I had a guy in the car who was having a heart attack. The police weren't lenient at all, but I'd do it again anytime. Never am I watching someone die before my eyes without at least trying to save them. Drove without a license. My cow was stuck in a mud pit and needed water while waiting for a rescue, but there was no running water at the barn. So I had to drive my dad's pickup home, about 10-15 minutes away, to fill up gallon jugs and buckets for her. Unfortunately, she didn't make it. Farm kids on farmland driving farm equipment and even trucks often don't need licenses in many states, and age restrictions are relaxed as well. When I was in the volunteer fire department, I was trying to access the front door of a structure fire to put a knock on it with the hose line. A deputy from the sheriff's office was standing on the front stoop blocking the door, telling us it was too dangerous to go in, so I pushed him off the stoop and went in to put the fire out. We saved 2/3 of the house that day. I got called out to see the sheriff and county fire chief arguing about arresting me for assaulting a deputy. But the This reminds me of the time the firefighter got arrested for blocking traffic. He was the engineer of the engine and it was policy to block traffic. In middle school, I volunteered in the school library. We partnered with the Lions Club and held a drive for old eyeglasses to donate. I had gotten glasses in 2nd grade, but my parents used their money on drugs instead of taking care of us kids, so I hadn't gotten another pair. The prescription was no longer right and they didn't fit my face, and I couldn't see. So I went through the box of donated glasses and found a pair that helped me see, and Jay stole them. I'd do tea again. Those glasses were eventually going to be donated to someone who needed them. Sounds like you just cut out the middleman to me. As a contractor in IT, I had all rights and permissions on the ERP we used. I was working the late shift on a Friday night. We have offices on the West Coast. Well, I get a phone call from Penn State. The money we had set up for them had not gone through. Checked, and someone up in finance did not send it. This guy needed that money now to pay his employees, or they would not get paid. I called everyone I could think of to get approval, to no avail, and this was a lot of cash. I think close to $1 million if I remember correctly. I said frick it and sent it, knowing I was breaking a federal law. Wrote an email to my boss and the Dodd supervisor as well, expecting to be fired the next day, if not arrested. Next day, I just get told to never do that again, with a bit of praise. I knew it was a big, and also truly neat project. Years later I am reading the news. The money I sent out helped create a machine to help paraplegics eat. I felt so proud to be a little part of that wheel. When I was 11, I used to be friends with a kid who had drug addict parents, and he was always hungry because his parents never bought food and spent all their money on drugs. So being 11 with no money, I used to steal food from the supermarket on the way to his house whenever I went over there. I'm glad I did it because it meant he got to eat a meal for the day, and I'm lucky I was never caught. I supervise student workers. I give them full hours even when I let them go early. They don't get paid enough and I really depend on them, and they're great people. I wish I could pay them what they deserve. I'm working on getting that changed, but it's a slow process. Run a red light. It was 3 AM and I was trying to go home after visiting the folks. Arrived at an intersection that spent way too long red. Drove a little forward and reversed a couple times hoping to trip something in the lights. I put the car into park soon after. Sitting there for nearly 8 minutes, I saw the perpendicular lights turn yellow. I popped back into drive while they turned red. After a few seconds of hesitation, they turned green again. At this point I just said frick it and carefully rolled though. Still avoid that particular intersection at night. Welcome to riding a motorcycle. So many times I've just crossed at the pedestrian crosswalk because the lights won't go green. I broke into an apartment once to rescue a cat. Previous tenants left her behind with nothing but a dried up piece of bologna on the floor. Turns out the poor thing was pregnant too. Took her in. She had her kittens, and my friends and I found homes for all of them. I worked at Sears Auto over college summer vacations. A lady came in once with a dead battery. She was visibly distressed. She said that she had to bounce her rent check to get the battery. No battery, no car, no work. She asked what the cheapest battery was. I sold her the $50 cheapo, but pulled the $300 super cranker with reserve power cell out of stock. When I worked at a pet store, I let a homeless man take dog food and dog treats for free because I didn't want his dog to starve. When I left my shift that day, I saw him eating the dog food along with his dog in the parking lot. Seeing that nearly made me break out in tears. Regular milk bones aren't all that bad. I'll still take a bite out of one every once in a while before I hand it to my dog. When my low-income patients go home, I fill a bag of supplies for them to take home from the hospital, especially if they are going to need expensive butt bandage stuff. Back when I worked, I would do this all the time. It costs the hospital almost nothing and it makes the person's day. When I was 5, I stole one of those small paper packets of tomato seeds while we were out buying groceries. My mom's birthday was the next day, and I felt like I should get her something. Tomato seeds. I made it out the store and halfway home, without getting caught. My mom found out when she realized I was walking funny. I was hiding the seeds under my armpit inside my jacket. I now realize that simply putting them in my pockets would have been much easier and I probably wouldn't have gotten caught. Mom made me bring them back and apologized to the cashier. She didn't get a present from me that year. Your mom did the right thing. Every kid needs this lesson to not be a thief. I used to work at Starbucks, and we're supposed to throw away the breakfast sandwiches after 2 days. Well, I thought that was total balls. So I would put everything in a trash bag and throw it away like normal at the end of the night. But then as I left, I would take them and bring them to the homeless that would always congregate at the Safeway next to where I lived. They were very grateful, and eventually would know me by name. It was the most gratifying feeling. Frick you, food industry. My great-grandparents or great-great-grandparents, can't remember which, stowed themselves illegally on a boat coming to the US from Czechoslovakia. They were illegal immigrants all their lives, I think, and that's how my mom's family line got here and led to me. The grandpa stayed in Czech and went to war. He never came back and the family never heard of him, so we assume he died in the war. Looking for something for a project in 8th grade. Clicked a link to a news site with an innocent name. Child peers on there instead of what it said it was. Freaked out, cleared my history, typed in all caps, oh my god, that's not what I meant, and hope that no cops came to my house. I love the idea of leaving a note in your search history claiming your innocence. I don't know if this is illegal, but I went to the bank thinking that they were still open since the doors were all unlocked. All the lights were off and no one was there. So I called the cops. The cop told me to walk inside to see if someone was there. Nope. But someone left a pair of bank keys on a desk. So, with police consent, I trespassed. An hour later, after I had left and gone to buy lunch, I saw 4 cop cars stationed outside the bank. I'm hoping that no one got fired for the wrong reason. I love how you call and basically say something's not right here, and the cops are just like, well, go on, go check it out. I used to work at a CVS. After Halloween, all their candy goes on sale, up to 80% off. After 3 weeks though, no one candy corn flavored chocolate or bat-shaped gummies. So they told me to throw it all away. This was about 2 shopping carts worth of candy. None of it was expired or damaged, just out of season. Instead of taking it to the dumpster, I placed it all in the back of my car. The next morning it all went to the local food drive center. In all honesty, I did keep 2 bags for myself. The food center sent me a thank you letter saying I donated over 50 pounds of candy. About 2 months later I am called into the head office. They have it all on video, me putting the candy in my car. They told me I owed them $500 in damages or they would press charges. I got a lawyer and argued that dumpster diving isn't illegal in my area, which since I was told to throw it away, this is what I did. In the end I was just fired and banned from the store. Charges dropped. That seriously sucks. This is something I don't get about companies. Instead of donating it, giving it away, they throw it away because of policy. What a world we live in now. Second post. When I was at school, our computing teacher one day surprised us by being stood outside the classroom waiting with a big smile on his face. This useless idiot normally didn't bother to turn up on time, if at all, and never taught us a dang thing. So this was odd. Congratulations guys. Today we get to do some manual labor. We were apparently tasked with taking all the computing room PCs, about 2 years old, and taking them to a skip at the bottom of the playing field, about a 20-minute walk away. We asked if we could have some or donate them to charity instead. He said no and that he'd be checking the skip was actually full. My friends and I quickly ran to the floor below and found the young, friendly physics teacher and asked to borrow some screwdrivers. He asked why. We said we didn't want to get him in trouble. He just shrugged and gave us the screwdrivers. An orderly line appeared at the skip as each PC was stripped of RAM, sound cards, network cards, primitive graphics cards and anything else that would be too obvious. These were then redistributed amongst the student population to improve their old PCs when needed. My friend did end up stuck with about 90% of the RAM sticks though, as they were only a few MB each. This was about 2001. On relating this story to some work colleagues a few years ago, one who had previously worked in IT procurement said G weren't just throwing out perfectly good PCs to be buttholes. They were almost certainly contractual required to do so by their PC providers. TLDR. Stole a ton of PC parts that were going to be destroyed for no good reason and distributed them to people who needed them. I worked at Dunkin' Donuts in high school. Like all the other places mentioned, I was supposed to throw out the donuts and bagels at the end of the night. On the weekends a bus driver at the local college would come in at close and I would give him everything so he could feed the starving drunk college kids on his bus that he was driving from the bars back to their dorms. He said it made them quieter, less likely to damage the bus, and a lot less vomit. Not illegal in the break the law sense, but it was not allowed where I worked. While I was in the army we would deploy 4 weeks on exercise. On the day we returned to garrison we had to supply a meal for the troops. After all equipment was cleaned and put away they were dismissed. Of course after being away they wouldn't want to eat army food and would be a hurry to leave. There would be a huge amount of food that would go to waste. I asked my superiors if I could bring it to the local homeless shelter and was told no, as it could open up the army to a lawsuit if the food happened to make people sick. I would wait until everyone left and would drive it all to the shelter and make an anonymous donation, while in uniform. I told the staff that I wasn't supposed to do this and they were grateful for the extra food. The people staying at the shelter would line up and help me unload the food. I continued to do this without anyone knowing. It was against the rules, but it made me sick all the food that would go to waste. I stole a bag of apples from the farmer's market because I saw some kittens that looked hungry. I was 4 and thought kittens would like to eat apples. Also, I got caught and my mom paid for the apples. This is the cutest confession of all time. I work at a pharmacy, and the couple living paycheck to paycheck couldn't afford the $300+ medication in place of food, so while at the counter, I slip the expensive meds in the bag with their everyday maintenance dugs and never say a word. My niece suffers from MES. Years ago she was on a mix of medicines that barely helped. They made her nauseous all of the time, unable to really eat anything without making the nausea worse, and she spent a good 80% of her time in pain. I watched this go on for about 2 months. I would carry her to her home most nights because she was either too weak to walk or in too much pain to try. She lost a good 15 pounds in those 2 months and was, understandably, miserable. It was heart-wrenching to see. I talked to a guy at work who fit the stereotypical image of a pothead and asked him if he knew where I could buy some weed. He did. Shocker. And a few days later I brought it to her house. She lived next door. I taught her how to inhale properly and she smoked about 1/3 of a very small joint. One of the side effects that she had from MES is that she would, on occasion, go cross-eyed at random. You'd be in the middle of a conversation with her and see it start to happen. That's when you knew that one of her episodes was starting. This happened every hour or so on the regular. That night was the first time in a very long while that I'd seen her smile, heard her laughing out loud, watched her eating one thing after another. She didn't go cross-eyed a single time that evening. Her nausea was completely absent. Her pain was no longer an issue, and she was happy, genuinely happy. I asked her how she was feeling at about 4 hours in and that's when all of it dawned on her. She'd been getting up and moving around her house, grabbing snacks from the kitchen, laughing and even dancing at times. And when she realized that, she broke down crying. We all did. 4 of us. But it was a good cry, the best cry. So I started buying weed for her whenever she needed it, would bring it to her house and sit on her back porch smoking with her. Kept that up until I moved out of state. I've been Uncle Nivwak for a lot of people throughout my life, many of them not at all related to me. Phoebe was my niece because of a particular set of circumstances and my choosing to take on the responsibility of looking out for her well-being. Those circumstances dissolved a short time after I moved and I, sadly, lost contact with her. Last I heard she is now married with children and is confined to a wheelchair, but she continues to supplement her prescribed medicines with weed when she can because it very literally saved her life. I'm a OBGYN. So in my country, induced abortion is punished by law. One occasion a woman was brought to my practice escorted by 2 policemen. She just had a miscarriage. They wanted to find out if she had induced the abortion. While I was interrogating, she told me she was single, worked as a janitor in a small office and had 3 infants waiting for her at home. She seemed desperate and was facing 5 to 10 years in jail. So I ruled it out the induced abortion. Looked through post history out of curiosity of which country you live in. Gosh. When I was 18 and had just moved away to college, my best friend was 16 and still in high school. Let's call him Jake. He is a gay guy and we're from a small town and he was having a rough time back home with being accepted and had just broken up with his BF. Jake called me very distressed in the middle of the night one day and told me to come get him, that he was running away from home cause he had fought with his parents again. Now WTF, it's 2 AM, it's a 3-hour drive one way and I've got school tomorrow, sorry buddy, no can do. We hang up. He calls back an hour later. He tells me that he's met a guy on the internet that will come pick him up and drive him to the city. 5 hours away from home. The guy is 31 and on his way. Now wait a minute, WTF. No Jake, you wait right there. I got up, got dressed and was in my car in about 3 minutes time. I drove home in 2.5 hours, picked my friend up and drove right back home. We got there around 6 AM. His parents were already blowing up my phone. I told them 300 times I hadn't seen Jake and they are crying and the school principal calls me and the police is on their way. So I packed Jake in my car and we went to the mall while the police searched my entire house. My roommate was at home. One day and lawsuit threats later we finally call Jake's parents and tell them he's with me and all and he goes home. He wasn't allowed to contact me for a year or I'd get sued for kidnapping. I was 18 so an adult. A year later we moved in together and he's still my friend. I wouldn't change anything I did because God forbid he had left with that man that night and something had happened to him, I would have never forgiven myself. I did what I thought was right. BTW, his parents and I are best friends now. TL. DR. Kidnapped my 16-year friend when I was 18 cause he wanted to run away. Almost got caught by police and sued by his parents. My whole hometown hated me for a while. 10/10 would kidnap him again. I hope the random guy was genuinely going to help him, but it was totally worth breaking the law to avoid the implications if he wasn't. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.